Wonderful. Well, I hope that was, somewhat, I can imagine, very enlightening for all of you. We are now going to move on to a really exciting part of our evening, which is going to be our panel discussion. We have, as I said before, probably a million times, we have some very, very exciting speakers who are joining us this evening. So I'm just going to use this opportunity to introduce them. If I could please ask the speakers to kindly put on their cameras and their microphones so I can spotlight them and talk about the wonderful work that you guys have all done. So here we are. These are our panelists for this evening. We are joined by Dame Sarah Thornton, the UK's Anti-Slavery Commissioner. We are also joined by Minka Van Til, who is the co-director of LSUK. LSUK is also our NGO partner. And last but definitely not least, we are joined by Marcia London, who is the American Bar Association's Employment and Labour International Co-Chair for Immigration and the Human Trafficking Committee. So I'm just going to introduce them to join us all. And I will just quickly spotlight you guys so everyone can see. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm just going to let you guys know a bit more about our incredible speakers here today. So Dame Sarah Thornton is the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner responsible for encouraging good practice in the prevention and detection of modern slavery and the identification of victims. She was the first chair of the National Police Chiefs Council from 2015 to 2019. Dame Sarah joined the Metropolitan Police Service in 1986 and in 2000 transferred to Thames Valley Police on promotion to Assistant Chief Constable. Following 4 years as Deputy Chief Constable, she was appointed Chief Constable in 2007. She contributed significantly to the national policing during this time and was the national lead on intelligence, Vice Chair of the ACPO Terrorism and Allied Matters, Director of the Police National Assessment Centre and ACPO Vice President. Dame Sarah is chair of the National Leadership Centre's Advisory Board. She is a member of the Royal College of Defence Studies, the Advisory Board for the Oxford University Centre for Criminology, and a trustee and board member of the Police Foundation. Dame Sarah is a graduate of Durham University, also holding a Master of Studies degree in Applied Criminology and Police Management from Cambridge University, alongside honorary doctorates from Oxford Brookes University and Buckinghamshire New University. She is an honorary professor in modern slavery at the Centre of the Study of International Slavery at the University of Liverpool. Dame Sarah was awarded the Queen's Police Medal in 2006 and made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2011. She was a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2019. She has also been recognised with a Career Achievement Award from the Police Training Authority trustees and Sir Robert Peel Medal for outstanding leadership in evidence-based policing. She is an honorary Air Commodore in the Royal Air Force Office of the Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner and supporting the work of the Auxiliary Police Squadron. Okay, so if we could all kindly welcome Dame Sarah Thornton. Thank you so much for joining us. It's honestly an incredible pleasure to have you. Thank you, Dame Sarah. We are also now going to... Wonderful.
I just think it's great to be here. It was a rather embarrassingly long CV, but great to be here and really, really
Not embarrassing, it's incredible, and it's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you. I'm also going to now talk about Marcia London. Marcia is actually a trustee here at ROMILDAMOR, which is truly exciting and incredible. She has a wealth of experience just as well, and I'm going to update you guys on all of that now. So, as I've said, our second panelist is Marcia London. She has practiced in the area of immigration, nationality, and European law since 1998. She has had a long career in the field of immigration and is incredibly passionate about this area of law. She has won a number of challenges against the Home Office regarding complex cases, which has resulted in discretionary leave for her clients, which is amazing. Marcia is the international co-chair to the Immigration and Human Trafficking Committee at the American Bar Association, Employment and Labour section. She continues to be ranked as a leading expert in Legal 500 UK 2020, recognized in the City Wealth list, ranked in Chambers 2021, listed in Who's Who Legal as a thought leader in corporate immigration 2021, and was chosen as one of the first legal services, our great champions, in 2019, which represents the UK in her field. So it's a pleasure to also welcome you, Marcia. Thank you for your time with us today.
Thank you.
And last but definitely not least, we have Minka Van Til. Minka and I met last summer when we started to actually speak about how ROMILDAMOR and LS UK can partner together. So Minka Van Til is the co-director of LS UK. She co-directs with Emily Chalk as well, I believe, is one of the founders. And LS UK is a charity that works with women who are exiting situations of trafficking and exploitation. They provide supported accommodation for women recovering from trafficking and sexual exploitation, where women can live until they are ready for independent living. Currently, they run 2 homes in London for single women. They also offer outreach support to women across London and beyond, to women and their families who live in the community as they work past their previous experiences and adapt into freedom. Their approach is to provide long-term support and bespoke support, which is totally unique to each individual and family. And we work very closely with LS, and I just have to say that they are such an incredible charity. What they're doing is truly amazing. So Minka, it's a pleasure to have you join us this evening as well.
So much, Romilda.
Of course. So yeah, I'm really excited about this evening. As everyone knows, we did a nice run through of how everything is going to go today. So we're really going to jump into our panel discussion. I have some really, thought-provoking questions that I think would be really insightful for the audience. So I'm going to ask that to all of you. And then after that, I'm sure the audience would also have some questions. I can see the chat box is filling up, so they're already sending through their questions, which is amazing. Okay, so my first question, I think I will point it to you, Dame Sarah. Obviously, what we've watched now has been, I would say, primarily focused on an American perspective, but I still felt it was okay to an extent to show it because it was a Western view of internal trafficking. And in light of what's going on right now in terms of Brexit and everything, I guess my first question is, what is the impact of the EU exit on modern day slavery?
Okay, I'll say something about the films and then try and segue into that question you've asked me. Particularly that second film, the trauma of those 3 women and their pain was visceral, wasn't it? And they, all of them, were very positive about the importance of telling their story, but I did feel quite uncomfortable sometimes listening to it, and partly that's good and partly that's not so good. But what struck me at the very end, that all 3 of them were very positive about what they wanted to do to prevent it from happening again, and you saw that sort of journey from utter trauma to the strength of their survival, which I thought was really impactful. And that point about don't give up, and you must never give up, and the sense of fighting. So I you know, really good. And those, I mean, Minka will know better than me, because she works with women in the UK who will have had very similar positions, and I've met some of them at Ella's house. So to your question about the EU, while a lot of trafficking is across forced borders, across international borders, some of it is just within the UK. The first worry about leaving the EU was that where you have got women who've been trafficked from other countries to the UK, or from the UK to other countries, that the sort of international investigations, which are really difficult, they're really complicated, they're really complex, that actually makes it so much harder, because a lot of the arrangements that were in place for police forces to cooperate are not all in place anymore. And that point that was made at the end of that film, that in none of those 3 cases had the traffickers been held to account in the criminal justice system, was a real concern. So there's a very obvious issue about it does make investigations cross-border much harder. Yeah. And that is a concern. I think the other thing that I've been very concerned about is because of all the new rules about the EU settlement scheme and the points-based system, which apply to people from the European Economic Area now. All those rules are just the sorts of things that the traffickers will seek to abuse. Yeah. And so we've been very concerned about both those new sets of rules, how they create new vulnerabilities. So for example, quite a lot of victims and survivors, if they apply for the EU settlement scheme, if they're already here, there's a real worry that they will get pre-settled status because they won't have all the documents to prove how long they've been here. Yeah. And then there's all the frailties about, if you've got pre-settled status, you haven't got as much access to services and benefits, but also you need to know that you have to apply for settled status at some point in the future. So there's a real concern that that creates vulnerability for maybe re-trafficking. But also the new points-based system means that people who get work visas, tier 2 visas, have got to be earning a certain salary and have got to be in a certain occupation. And there's a list of authorised occupations. And the real worry is that people, either unintentionally or intentionally, will come as visitors from the EU, and they will start working. And they will not be working legally. And that makes people so vulnerable to all sorts of exploitation. And we're really concerned about the extent to which people are aware of that and what steps the government have put in place to make sure that that doesn't happen and that visitor route doesn't actually cause fresh vulnerability. So I'll stop there, but there are some real concerns about those changes creating fresh vulnerabilities in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah. That's really insightful. I'm also going to point this same question to yourself, Marcia. I know
that because I'm thinking Sarah's taken all my tips. She's taken all the things I was going to say, but it's absolutely fine. It's perfect. I absolutely agree with you. One of the huge issues, obviously, to everyone watching was, we left on the 30th of December, right? 31st of December, sorry, 11 o'clock. Some of us had, you know, wine glasses in our hand to mourn the fact that we were coming out of Europe. But what it actually means as well is that, again, echoing what Sarah said, was that the intelligence services, right, which was connected with the UK and with Europe, words like Interpol, the Schengen information systems, which was one of the largest systems which allowed the Europe and the UK to share information. So whilst I accept that there is going to be something in place, when I was thinking about doing this evening, I looked at the Trade Cooperation Agreement, which is the agreement that the government they keep updating it. So it's the agreement that they have with Europe since the 1st of January. And when I looked at that document, which is, you know, hundreds of pages long, when I looked at that document, there wasn't anything specific about the intelligence services to say what's going to replace them. So that's a huge worry, because it means the UK on its own won't have access to all of that information in Europe, or doesn't have it right now. But one would hope that they're going to replace it with something, because you have to. Otherwise, the UK is cut off from all of that intelligence information. Again, echoing what Sarah said about the fact that there is this new immigration system that is come into place from the 1st of January, right? So a European national, for example, who's never been in the UK, if they're going to come this year or from the 1st of January, by right, and if they're going to work in the UK, they need to be sponsored. They have to be sponsored, right? Now, a worry is, does everyone know that? You know, do European nationals know that? So it could be that you're going to have European nationals who are coming into the UK from potentially countries where human trafficking is very high. They'll come for a holiday and then they might stay, and then when they realise that actually they need to be sponsored, or they need to do something to regularise their immigration position in the UK, that's when the fear is going to come in, because that's when they are incredibly vulnerable, and they will be worried about making themselves known to the authorities. Because what we often see is that those who are, you know, in this area committing criminal activity, it's one of the things that they use. They either take people's passports from them, or they scare them and say, look, you know, if you go to the authorities, you know, a number of things can happen. You can end up in detention and so on. So there's a huge risk in that sense. Of course, you've got the settlement scheme, but the settlement scheme, like you spoke about, does mean that in a lot of circumstances, you've got to prove that you've been here before the 1st of January, right? You've got up until the 30th of June to sort your position out. So the government talks about 5 million European nationals have so far applied under that scheme. But what we are concerned about is who's going to be left off, right? We all actually know as well, sadly, the UK operates in a very hostile environment. Now that word goes around loads and loads and people have been talking about it, but that's the reality. So someone coming into this country, you can look at the past history of the UK and it doesn't look particularly welcoming. So when you're looking at, you know, someone who is vulnerable and in those types of situations, we don't look very welcoming. And because there are so many changes, which, you know, on the one level, yes, they've been promoted, and, you know, a very savvy person will know what they're talking about, right? Will know what they need to do. But you're talking about people who don't know, who don't have the resources, right? And so where they don't have the resources, it's very easy for those who are in this world, in this criminal behaviour, to not encourage, but abuse that. And the evidence is there nationally, you know, like I say, when you look, it's a very hostile situation from an immigration perspective. My final point will be about the skills. So, you know, anyone watching the news, we was talking about skilled workers. Yes, and that is what we've got under the immigration rules, the new Immigration Act that's come out. Although on a professional level, the government talks about the skill level has been reduced. It has been, but if you look at Europe and if you look at the areas that needed, you know, people needing work and so on, it was in the agriculture industry, it was in the hospitality industry, so it's in the industries that aren't necessarily covered under the immigration rules. So that is where there's a massive worry, because it's the vulnerable sectors where we see that people are often abused in those sectors. So that's my view. I will be quiet now, sorry. But yeah, that's my view.
Very much, Marcia. That was really insightful. I already feel like I wish we had more time, because these are really, really important points and very relevant. I feel like we may touch on this a bit later about, you know, what the next steps would be, having highlighted these issues. But I do want to really kind of bring it home to the individuals that are at present who we're talking about, the survivors. And I want to direct my next question to Minka. What would you say are the main implications that COVID-19 is having on the well-being of human trafficking survivors and victims?
Yeah, so I mean, so much, you know, COVID-19 has been so awful for the mental health of our service users. And what we've seen, especially in the beginning, was that you know, some service users saying that the experience of lockdown and kind of, you know, basic freedoms being kind of removed, that has been very re-triggering to some people. And just generally, you know, not seeing people face to face and the stuff that we're all struggling with. You know, if you're already struggling with anxiety and depression, and, you know, like you saw, you know, the women in those films, you know, it's really a lot to try and, you know, battle through these, the history of some of this stuff. So, you know, it's the exact time when you need friends and family and, you know, social workers and people around you in a community. So when all that stuff kind of falls away, it makes it so much harder to, you know, take those steps to recovery. We've also seen, you know, practical stuff. So barriers in technology, for example, you know, with everything going online now. And, you know, to begin with, a lot of the women at Ellis didn't have even a laptop. So we were very fortunate. We actually got a grant in to buy laptops for all of our women, which, you know, has been really amazing. But, you know, then also the digital skills to kind of keep up with everything that's now online. So, you know, a lot of English classes or education, kind of applying for things, just, you know, even just like doctor's appointments and you know, everything has gone online. And if you've got kind of a digital skills gap, it's sort of harder to keep up with that stuff. And then, you know, there's also been delays in the usual services that are already really slow. So like immigration applications and, you know, processing housing applications, things like that, that they've been even slower. So a lot of women have felt like, you know, really hopeless and kind of, where's the light at the end of the tunnel, you know? So that kind of, you know, sort of feeling of being stuck, things not moving forward. And then, yeah, another really practical issue has been for a lot of our service users, we've seen that, you know, they live in shared accommodation. So there's actually no private space to work or to have kind of, you know, intimate conversations with support workers or counselors. And so to have those really difficult conversations that, you know, are really needed, again, to sort of take those steps in recovery. So yeah, those are just some of the things that we've seen.
Wow, thank you so much, Minka. It's very firsthand, everything you've described. I mean, we can only imagine the extent. And obviously for us here at ROMILDAMOR, we get to meet some of the clients and, you know, speak to them, but there's just so much to it. There really, really is. So thank you so much for enlightening us on that. We have 2 more questions. So the third one is going to talk about supply chains. So it's not going to be really focused so much on sexual exploitation, but I really am passionate about this area of human trafficking because it's something that we are all linked to, because almost everything we buy goes through a supply chain, and there's a very high risk of forced labor trafficking going all across the globe. And so I wanted us to touch on this as well, and we'll finalize on really bringing everything that we've pointed out today together before we move into our Q&A section. So I will direct this question firstly back to you, Marcia. What is the impact COVID-19 is having on global supply chains, would you say?
Yeah, I think it's probably, it's about awareness, isn't it, really? This is what I think. I think even from the point of us as individuals, right, and when we're talking to our friends or neighbours or anyone, I think you really have to sort of say to them, do you know where you got that item from? Do you know what their actual commitment is? So I have a daughter, she's kind of getting into fashion and so on, and I talk to her and I say to her, well, do they have a statement on their website, or do they have some kind of known commitment to where they, you know, who they use? I'm explaining that to her, and I'm definitely not as knowledgeable as you guys, right? But I'm explaining that because I think it's at that level that you need to advise and speak to people. And even I think everyone has a personal obligation, quite frankly, right, to look at whatever it is that they're buying or where they're getting it from, so that you can take part in it. Obviously, you've got the Sarah Thornton's going to probably know this more than me, but you've got, you know, the supply chain acts and things like that that the government have introduced to say that every company over a certain amount of income needs to make sure that they've got this statement on their corporations and on their websites and things like that. And so it's about everyone taking a personal responsibility, is what I think, that you must, even if you're buying a kettle or a Hoover or a clothing, all of it, really get involved and look at it from that aspect, because I think everybody has an obligation to do that. And I think obviously when I'm reading reports and things like that, you are seeing it getting worse with the supply chains because of COVID, because those industries are closing down a lot of the times, right? The factories are closing, so you're seeing people being forced into doing other things. You know, we've got the thing coming from China, you know, it's just huge. And I think, but when you're looking at it, I do think people should look at it on a more personal level as well as a corporate level, but look for yourself and try and do something about it. It's about the awareness. I don't know if that answers your question, but
it does. It really does. Thank you so much, Marcia, for that. I'm also going to point this in your direction as well, Dame Sarah.
So as has been said, the COVID has really shone a light on these international supply chains and just how vulnerable they are and how they lack resilience. And so if you think about examples whereby companies in the UK cancelled all their orders from factories in Bangladesh, so the women and girls who work there, you know, suddenly had no work. That's just one example. Lots of that sort of thing where there wasn't a kind of responsibility to people in those supply chains. Or the other sort of end of it is that, you know, if you think about it, we've had to buy a lot of things at short notice very quickly, whether that's personal protective equipment, whether that's kind of, you know, rubber gloves, whether it's all that sort of plastic screening. And if you speak to people who work in commercial departments or procurement departments, they will say that's the classic, because you haven't got the opportunity to do the due diligence. You're having to buy a lot of stuff. There isn't the relationship that you've had over the years. And so for all sorts of reasons, and also you're procuring stuff like rubber and textiles, where we know they're high risk. There's all sorts of reasons why COVID, I think, has really highlighted the problem in international supply chains. And of course, think about the UK, the issue about supply chains in our own textile industry was brought to a fore, where in Leicester there were very high levels of COVID, if you remember, during the summer. And one of the concerns was actually that was being exacerbated by working conditions in some of the textile factories. So that kind of, you know, raised the issue. So absolutely, it's brought it to the fore. And for me, all our attention, absolutely the point that you're making about awareness, but it's the people from whom we buy, the retailers, the brands, at the moment have no legal responsibility or accountability for what happens in these lengthy supply chains. So people who are either in forced labour or suffering a wide range of labour abuses, it's not their problem. And I think it's raised the issue in a lot of people's minds and said, well, how can that be? Because you're just sort of purchasing everything through these lengthy supply chains. Can it be right that you've got no responsibility for the workers in those supply chains across the globe? So you mentioned the Act and Section 54 of the Modern Slavery Act, the requirement of companies with a turnover of more than £36 million in this country to write a modern slavery statement. And that's great, and let's take that seriously. But that's just words. What really matters is the actions. And I think government could toughen up the law, but you're absolutely right. The more all of us do to ask those questions, because the problem is, if we wear clothes, if we eat chocolate and drink coffee and we have electronics, there are problems in all those supply chains. So I think we've all got to be much more demanding consumers.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Marcia. I'm honestly enlightened. I can imagine for everyone else, especially what you said about the PPE as a result of COVID and the demand for that. And you definitely know there hasn't been enough due diligence in checking how that has been supplied and produced. So that is really, really enlightening. We're going to draw on our final question, and it's basically going to tie in all the 3 questions I've asked you all. So it's basically, this is to our guests today and also to the general public and even corporations. What are the measures that need to be put in place going forward to deal with these 3 things, to deal with the EU exit, so to deal with Brexit on modern day slavery, to deal with COVID-19 on survivors and victims, and to deal with COVID-19's impact on the supply chain industry as well. So what can we do? What is the goal moving forward? Because there's enough, we can talk about it, and what you said rightly, Dame Sarah, it can be words, but I'm so against words, we need to act. What can we practically do about this? So whoever wants to go first is more than welcome. Minka, I know that you are now like in the schedule to speak first, so you can speak first. I know you are going to give us like a meaty answer based on the survivors, so you can really focus on that if you want to go first.
Oh dear, just set me up there for from what I kind of understood of the question, sort of more, you know, what can an individual do if you're sort of watching, is just really becoming aware of the issue, and everyone who's here today is, you know, a real step forward in that, kind of watching those videos and hearing from, you know, us speak about this as well. So, you know, having the knowledge and the awareness is really, really important. And then, you know, another thing to really, you know, participate in the fight against modern slavery is to support one of the charities who is working in the space. And, you know, that can be a charity kind of in prevention or aftercare, or you know, pick one and support it. It doesn't even need to be financially. It could be, you know, just follow them on social media and kind of share their posts and their information. And you know, it's already been mentioned before. Sarah sort of mentioned it already about, you know, lifestyle. What products do you buy? And, you know, pick your products carefully and kind of look behind the company that's producing these things, because there are loads of organizations that are, you know, either, you know, they kind of avoid sort of modern slavery in their supply chains, or they're actively sort of participating in the fight. So yeah, those are just some tips I've got.
Very helpful. Thank you so much, Minka. Whoever wants to go next is more than welcome.
I'll do it, shouldn't I? I've got to jump in there. I guess a couple of things I would say is that I absolutely salute Minka and all the work that her and her organisation does. And I think that was a really important thing to just put it out there and say, support organisations like yours, right? Because, you know, in my day, when I first started out, there wasn't even the internet, there wasn't anything like that, right? And when you look at the internet now and how powerful it can be, and like you say, social media and so on, I do think it's about spreading that message. And like you quite rightly saying, supporting organisations like yours, supporting Romilda's organisation and all this sort of stuff. Share the information, get it out there, because you may well find that some people just don't know, or they're not that aware of it or anything, you know, and that's what often happens. With the ABA, as we said at the beginning, I'm the international co-chair, and it's a relatively new position, but what they're trying to do is share the knowledge, share the awareness. So obviously they've got a new president, Biden. There are, you know, organisations trying to give the US government more information to say, look, we need to look at this on a global level, and we need to make sure that there's absolute connectivity with Europe, with the UK, so that we're all sort of doing the same thing. And so again, I know I've said it before, but it is about awareness, and literally people going out there, like you say, and supporting organisations like yours. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Marcia. Very, very helpful and very practical. Dame Sarah.
I think I've got one practical thing left, because I would utterly agree with everything has been said, and that point about raising awareness in all sorts of different ways, I think is really, really important. But once people are a little bit more aware, the other thing that's worth thinking about is how victims get help. Sometimes, you know, it was terrible in that film, wasn't it, when she said she called the police and they weren't interested in her being trafficked, they were just interested in drugs. And sometimes, you know, victims will come into contact with maybe people in the health service or social workers or police, and they feel able to say something and they get help. But also, if we're more aware of the signs and things to look out for, there is a role for the general public to be the eyes and ears. Now, if you have a concern about somebody, you can always call the police, but you can call Crime Stoppers anonymously. And there have been quite a few Crime Stoppers campaigns saying, you know, this is what you need to be looking out for. Or there is a modern slavery helpline run by the charity Unseen. So there are different ways to actually raise concerns that you've got for another person. So it's one of those things where you say, shall I, shan't I? You know, well, just dare to share. Just it won't cause any problems. Just say, actually, I'm really quite concerned about this person, and notify.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dame Sarah. Thank you, all of you. This has been very, very amazing and insightful. And I think it's important to know that even though modern day slavery is such a huge and overwhelming practice, there is an onus on all of us. We have to do our part. And I know it may sound a bit, I don't mean to sound demanding, but I think if we care and we know enough, there's little things that we can do to really contribute to change. And I think that has been like the common conversation here today. We're now going to turn it to the audience. So we're going to enter into a question and answer session. Evan, are you there? Wait for her to put her camera on. And
yes,
hi, Evan.
I'm there. Hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello. So I would really appreciate if you can kind of navigate the questions for us. Are there the chat box? And if so as well, if anyone wants to put their mic on, please raise your hand and we can work on that too.
Yeah, thank you. So while I'm waiting for hands to come up, I'll start with the first question that's been directly sent to me. And yeah, we can work our way up to some of the questions that have been sent before. So this question says, can any of the panelists comment on the disproportionate effect of COVID-19 and lockdowns on women in situations of trafficking?
Okay, who would want to take that? I do feel like Minka touched on it lightly, well, not even lightly, in great depth. But does anyone else want to answer that? Volunteer?
I think the thing to say, which is maybe very obvious, that we know when we look at the impact on COVID on people, it's affected the vulnerable of the world more than it has those who are privileged. And therefore, you know, I'm afraid that it has affected victims and survivors, both in this country and overseas. But I think it also, it creates greater vulnerability for the future. So people like Minka and Ella's house and all the charities and NGOs have done a fantastic job in the UK of looking after the victims and survivors who are in the safe houses. I've been in meetings in Europe where that has just not happened. Safe houses have closed down. So there's been a brilliant job supporting people. But I think what concerns me is thinking to the future, and that as there are fewer jobs, particularly in certain sectors, that people will feel that the best option they've got is to work in an exploitative situation. So that's what really concerns me. I think on the whole, a lot of people in service have been looked after. There's a concern, of course, about those who are hidden and the ability, if services haven't been there, to identify victims and survivors. But I'm more concerned, I think, about the potential for increased vulnerability over the next year or so.
Thank you for that, Dame Sarah. Thank you. Evan, any more questions?
Yes. So the next question states, it says, also, is the expectation that the reduction in global mobility likely to reduce cross-border trafficking in the long run? So I'll repeat that again. Is the expectation that the reduction in global mobility likely to reduce cross-border trafficking in the long run?
Okay, so reduction in global mobility, meaning as a result of Brexit. So, I mean, or is it as a result of COVID? Maybe both. People traveling less.
Sorry, I think it's probably a bit of both, isn't it? Because the assumption is where everybody is working from home or working, you know, outside, you know, they're not in the office, so everyone's working remotely, right? So the idea is global mobility is going to reduce. I think it's temporary, to be honest. I think it's temporary. I think, you know, in the next, I don't know, 18 months, you're going to see the new normal. So global mobility is going to start again because businesses, you know, people will start to travel, and I think it's going to change, and it won't probably go back to the levels that it was before. But I do believe eventually it will change. Yeah.
So I agree with you that there is an impact on global mobility at the moment, but think about two other things that are going to happen over the next few years. Issues about climate change, which will force more migration, and we're not going to stop having wars and conflicts, which also cause people to be on the move. So I think maybe because of COVID, there is a temporary reduction, but I completely agree with you. It won't last.
I agree also. I think it's just us kind of adjusting to the current situation, but it may not have a lasting impact. Okay, wonderful. Any more questions, Evan? Has anyone raised their hand?
Yes, there are.
Written. It looks like there's quite a lot of questions.
Yeah, I've checked the participants. Nobody has raised their hand yet, but there are quite a lot of questions.
Wonderful.
So I will go on to the next question. And so, okay, it's a bit long, but it says, watching the two screenings, it seems that girls are targeted at the age that they are impressionable. Should/could schools be talking about this subject matter so that young people and children become aware of the signs and are able to identify when they or their friends/siblings are being groomed? And then they've just added an additional part which says, giving them the information empowers them to stand up for themselves. It would also give children a link to someone they could talk to confidentially.
Who would like to answer this question?
So there's definitely a role for schools. My own view is that we don't do enough of it, but I have seen good programs, and, you know, starting from quite a young age, which are about, you know, respecting yourself and valuing yourself and what's allowed and not allowed, that sort of thing, moving up to some, you know, really good programs, particularly around child sexual exploitation and kind of raising the risks there and all the issues around grooming and who you trust. So there are materials, but I do think we could do an awful lot more in schools and in other areas, like, you know, in youth work and that sort of situation where young people might be listening and in a position to be influenced.
Wonderful. I agree with you completely. I think education is even a form of elimination. It can prohibit women and girls particularly, or even boys, from being exploited, because they can look out for the correct signs when they grow up. You know, a lot of the time the traffickers prey on vulnerability, they prey on their naivety and them not knowing what's actually going on. But if they are educated and warned of this beforehand, they can be like, okay, no, or, you know, this looks like what I was taught back in school. So 100% agree. Thank you, Dame Sarah. Evan?
Yes, thank you. So the next question asks, what drawbacks do grassroots organizations face sharing knowledge and policies and collaborating to prevent human trafficking during COVID? So that's, what drawbacks do grassroots organizations face sharing knowledge and policies and collaborating to prevent human trafficking during COVID?
I can maybe say something about that. So what we've, I guess, struggled with during COVID is, you know, that usually There'd be loads of events to kind of attend, and you know, community groups we'd be asked to speak at. And especially at the start of COVID, you know, there's a lot of people weren't so sure. So now things are picking up again, and we can kind of attend things online, which is actually great, because sometimes you can reach a bigger audience. But at the start, we had a bit of, you know, oh, we're sort of now not kind of speaking about what we're doing apart from sharing stories on social media. But yeah, I think, as I said as well, things can continue online, raising awareness, and also kind of meeting with within the sector. So the Human Trafficking Foundation organizes kind of sector meetings where you know, knowledge and kind of ideas are shared to kind of influence policy decisions.
I mean, I think on the whole, frontline organisations have collaborated quite a lot during COVID. I don't, as you say, whether it's the Human Trafficking Foundation, but that's one of the good things about all this technology. It's very easy to get loads of folk on a conference call to discuss what they've been doing. So I think there have been some upsides because we've got together more to discuss what the problems are.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's actually been really good to kind of collaborate. We've always collaborated a lot with other charities, and to kind of continue that. One of the things, you know, really impacting some of our service users is that, so we do a lot of referring our service users onto other services from other organizations. And that's been more difficult because people are sort of more kind of hesitant to start new things. So online, so where before we'd kind of accompany to sort of one of our partner organizations events or kind of services, it's now sort of you know, a lot of women saying, oh, I'll just wait until it's live again before, you know, I try something new. Or so that's been a downside.
Yeah, although Minka, I've also heard the converse. I was talking to Sophie Hayes Foundation, who do a lot of work in the sort of space that you're in, Romilda, trying to give survivors the ability to get into the workplace and get work-like skills. They've put all their courses online and actually have got more people on them, which has been great. So that's worked quite well, I think.
Yeah, I think there is a gradual shift happening, which is really beneficial. Yeah, we found that, you know, in working with yourself, Minka, and the Ellis team, that, yeah, it's not, you know, imminent. People are still restructuring. For example, we are working with South Thames College, and they're setting up a course to provide ESOL, English language training, for the women. And it's about now having to facilitate and put it online until the measures change and everything like that. But we are doing all that we can, and the schools are really receptive, and they're even putting together a bespoke course for the women. We also have Talk Wandsworth, they specialize in giving counseling, and they're actually going to put together like a online video workshop for the women to talk about how to deal with, you know, self-care, anxiety, and things like that they can just watch online. So it's just really about kind of navigating the current situation in a way that's really accommodating and supportive for the women. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. Our time is really running fast. We have so many questions, and I'm just hoping we'll be able to get through as much as possible. Evan?
Yeah, we still have 4 questions to go, so hopefully we'll get through them all.
Yeah.
So the first question of the 4 asks this. It says, the negative narratives and stereotypes associated with trafficking victims are a hindrance to their rehabilitation journeys, such as employment. How can we change this narrative? Would you like me to repeat the question again?
No, I heard it. I mean, I can touch on this slightly. When you say negative narrative and stereotype, what rings to mind is just the fine line, and this is from a legal perspective, from what's viewed by, you know, those even in the public or in the law, a fine line between prostitution and sexual exploitation. And I think it's the identification issue that may be posed here, victim identification, on 2 or actually 3 fronts, whereby the victim themselves may not even realize that they're a trafficking victim because of how they've been lured by the trafficker, you know, and then also being afraid for them to actually speak out and, you know, expose the trafficker in a sense as well. So if they are identified as a prostitute, that is where I would see the narrative to come from. However, I just can't see why if they are known to be a human trafficking survivor, there would be some kind of discrimination or limited access to support for them. I feel like that's where it should increase even more. I don't know if any of you have anything else to add, but I feel like the only issue would be if they are being falsely identified as a prostitute and being seen to like not need any support. But if they are a survivor or victim, I can't see why there would be any limited resource available to them.
I guess I would just challenge the question a little bit, because I would say from all my understanding of programs that are helping survivors into work, and there's a really good program which is set up by the Co-op called Bright Futures, and it's been reviewed and written about, and placing people in a variety of different organisations, the Co-op to John Lewis and Waitrose to Vodafone, and speaking to people from those businesses and the survivors that were involved. There didn't ever, as far as I could see, seem to be an issue about that negative image, that actually the problems were more about immigration rules not allowing people to work. Actually, when people got into the workplace, on the whole, you know, it worked really very well, and there wasn't that negativity that's implicit in the question. So I think I would just push back a little bit on that. It's about you know, really thinking and working with people to give them the confidence and the skills to equip them to regain their independence. And as I say, there are some great programs out there, and I'm not aware that negative perceptions are a particular problem. There are other issues.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. 100%. Okay. All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions. Evan, could I ask you, just as a matter of fairness, to scroll up to whoever, you know, kind of put a question first, just so it's fair and we've tried to cover as many people as possible.
Yes. Scrolling up now. For some reason, I can't see any questions above. I don't know what's going on with my laptop. Sorry, everyone.
I think I should be able to see. So let's see here. Right, so there's a question here from Dr. Laura Wood, which says, maybe in anti-trafficking awareness raising outreaches, we need to connect initially over how traffickers may make their victim feel, more than labels.
I think Laura raises a really good point. I think that was following on a discussion about labelling of women, wasn't it? I'll tell you what, I'll pick, there's a question here which I like the look of, in as much as I know what the answer is. It talked about cheaper hotel chains and whether receptionists could be trained what to look out for. If people are interested in that, there's an organisation called the Shiva Foundation that have just published a sort of toolkit for helping small businesses with this. One of the problems with the hotel trade is that I'd always assumed there were these big companies that ran all the hotels, but they have a sort of a contracting out business model as well. And so if you speak to the kind of people in, you know, maybe cleaners who are working in the hotels, they very rarely understand who exactly they work for. But there is an organisation called the Shiva Foundation, which has done a lot of work in this area and put out some good resources. So have a look at theirs. So there is some work being done. A lot more needs to be done, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Wonderful. That's really handy. I think practical guides like that are always gold dust. We really, really need more of it. So that's amazing. I think we've got time for just one more question. Evan, do we have any more?
Yeah, so I'll just read this final question. It says, do the panel think there will be a long-term impact of increased vulnerability in our children/young people to exploitation as a result of school closures and the economic impact on struggling families?
Wow, that's complex.
So
Good
what we know
question.
for sure is that during COVID, there's been a real concern about children who are vulnerable and not being as visible to schools and social workers. So there's a real concern about that. And the Children's Commission has raised that on numerous occasions. The other thing is we know that county lines drug dealing, where vulnerable children are exploited and forced to trade traffic drugs, that has carried on completely uninterrupted during COVID. So there are certainly things that have happened which we know are forms of exploitation and will have damaged children in the short term. I suspect that they will have a long shadow, which is why the Children's Commissioner has always argued very strongly for more support for children in schools now, I guess, to try and mitigate that risk and those harms that have been perpetrated.
And something that jumped to my mind is potential increase in kind of domestic violence for children who are sort of at home more and being exposed to that, and that may increase vulnerability sort of long term as well. And then also just generally COVID-19, the long term effects potentially increased inequality and therefore, you know, children from already kind of impoverished backgrounds kind of being more at risk of exploitation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think this has honestly been very, very enlightening and very, very helpful to all of us. I don't know if anyone has any comments to make, anything else to add in total.
Well, thank you, Romilda, for pulling us all together.
Thanks so much.
Thank you all. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm really, really excited for hopefully what will become of this, you know, more awareness, people actually taking really good proactive steps to really contribute to the anti-slavery movement as a whole. So thank you so much to all our speakers. We're just going to round up and just finalize. We have a giveaway announcement to make and also to thank our sponsor. So we'll just do that before we end for today. I think my team has actually sent me who the winner is. So let's see. Yeah, so I just want to say a massive thank you to London Baker Boy, who sponsored this event today. He created these absolutely gorgeous looking gourmand chocolates, and the winner is the Ethiopian foodie. So we will send you a message. You are winning these delicious chocolates that he made in honor of International Women's Day. You can see our Romilda Amor love heart right there, and yeah, we'll send you that right across, so do enjoy. And yeah, if you'd like to stay connected, our Instagram, LinkedIn and Facebook is all at Romilda Amor, so please stay connected with us. We have a lot more coming up, a lot more events, a lot more, you know, ways to really raise awareness and educate you all, so please do stay connected with us, and feel free also to contact us at info@romildaamor.com if you have any questions, if you have any comments, or you just want to say hello to me. I'm really nice, I love talking to everyone, so please feel free to send us a message and come through. But a massive thank you to all of you who have joined us today. It's really heartwarming to see people take out their time to come together and learn about human trafficking and learn about what they can actually do to proactively contribute to change. Marcia London, thank you. It's an honor. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. Dame Sarah, thank you so much for your insightful wisdom and knowledge. And also thank you so much, Minka, as well, for all that you have contributed today and our partnership working together also. So without much further ado, I'd like to thank you all, and I wish everyone a lovely evening, and once again, happy International Women's Day. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Nice to meet you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.